It's so funny to see absolute freaks melt down because Donald Trump is incentivizing white people to move to the United States of America and seek refuge from their totalitarian states back here in Europe and in South Africa. Trump considers overhaul of the refugee system that would favour white people. Shock, horror, and you should see the people melting down because of the wording of this new proposed overhaul by Donald Trump. The proposal would transform a program aimed at helping the most vulnerable people in the world into one that gives preference to mostly white people who say they are being persecuted. Very interesting the way the New York Times word that, who say that they're being persecuted. Are you for real? Do you not know what is happening in the Western world? And that is of course a rhetorical question because of course they know what's going on. It's all part of the propaganda and the gaslighting and the suppression of free speech and the eradication of white people. What else do you think importing millions and millions of brown people into Western countries is for? Do you think it's because of virtue, or do you think that these people are desperately in need and only we can help them? No, it's not. It's to eradicate the white people. The plan has been in place for a long time. Open your fucking eyes. Wake up. Trump's administration officials have not yet ruled out any ideas, according to the people familiar with the planning, although there is no set timetable approving or rejecting these ideas. The proposed changes would put new emphasis on whether applicants would be able to assimilate into the United States of America. Very important line, and of course that would be glossed over by the wording of the left-wing media. Would the people coming under this new overhaul be able to assimilate? Yes, because they're not coming from a third world country where people eat each other. And also, they wouldn't be incentivized by NGOs and every single left-leaning politician to assimilate only with their own. These white people that would come from Europe, that would come from South Africa, would obviously be smart enough to know that they need to assimilate to the ways of the American state and be a benefit to the economy, to the society, to your neighborhoods. Of course, this doesn't happen with our refugees at the moment because they're incentivized not to do that. And secondly, they've spent about 80 years being bombed by the United States of America, by Britain, by France, pretty much every Western country you can imagine. Of course, this is at the behest of a small Middle Eastern country that we're not allowed to speak about. But besides that, how do you think that makes all these refugees that are flooding into Western countries feel about the white faces they see as soon as they get off the boat, as soon as they tear up their passports? How do you think they feel about the Irish, the Danish, the Italians, the French, the English, the Americans? Do you think that they're sitting there going, oh, thank you so much for sending that food package and doing the virtuous flotilla out to Palestine and getting caught and then getting to do a bunch of podcasts? Thank you so much for all that. They are in their bollocks. They're looking at every single white face thinking, you're the people who have facilitated the bombing of our families, of generations of our families. And as we've seen with the empirical data, these people do not assimilate, and these people's sole purpose is to promote their own religion and to crush the white man. It's fact. Absolute fact. So they're talking about the assimilation of white people into the United States. Of course, I think this is brilliant. American history and values and respect of cultural norms. Very interesting term there again. Norms. Slaughtering sheep at the side of the road, congregating in gangs to go after underage young girls, as we've seen in the United Kingdom. That's not cultural norms, and that's not the cultural norm that I'm interested in anyway. Here's where it gets really interesting for someone like myself. The proposal also advises Mr. Trump to prioritize Europeans who have been targeted for peaceful expression of views online, such as opposition to mass migration or support for populist political parties. Wow. Isn't that extremely interesting and hopeful? For Europeans who have been targeted because of their peaceful expression. What is an example of a targeted attack for peaceful expressions of speech? Well, that would be someone like myself, who has had a number of police officers standing in this room because of my speech, because of my dissenting ideas. And it would also apply to someone like myself, who in the last 5 weeks has been officially banned in Ireland under the banner of hate speech. My content, my speech, my expressions, everything that I believe in a democratic country should be allowed to be spoken about has been eradicated Political persecution is what I would call it. And to see that the United States might possibly be accepting of people like us who are persecuted here in Ireland is absolutely fantastic. The meltdowns, of course, are brilliant. This guy here, right? Let's have a little look at this lad. Mehdi Hassan, right? I've seen his face on TikTok. I've seen his face on social media. And some people have been hoodwinked into thinking that this guy is like based because he's constantly going after Israel. It's only to promote his own angle, of course. The guy is a Muslim extremist. And he says in response to this overhaul of the refugee status in the United States, don't call him a white supremacist or a white nationalist. Don't you dare. Okay. He hears the news that President Trump is considering an overhaul of the US refugee program and that would favour mostly white people, documents show. And this is how he responds. Overtly calling him a white supremacist and a white nationalist. Cool. So you go down through the comments of this guy. Very prominent, 600,000 views on this tweet. Absolute badass, right? So I love this comment here from Leon with the Union Jack. He asks Grok, which is Twitter's AI tool, how many times has Mehdi Hassan condemned rape grooming gangs in the UK? Very good question, because I do believe that Mr. Hassan lives in the UK. That's where he makes his money and that's where he does his business from. And Grok answers with 0. From the review of his ex-posts and public statements, Hassan has engaged with the topic, interviewing persecutors like Nazir Hafazal and acknowledging multi-ethnic victims, but frames the discussion around racism in coverage of white perpetrator equivalents. Without a standalone denunciation of the Pakistan and Muslim grooming gangs, his emphasis stays on a broader child protection over specific outrage at those scandals. Very interestingly put. Leon follows that up with, why wouldn't he condemn them directly? Isn't that a little counterproductive considering the demographics in the UK are overrepresented? Grok responds with, Hassan likely prioritizes shielding Muslim communities from scrutiny over unequivocal victim advocacy, viewing a direct condemnation as enabling Islamophobia narratives. This selective framing, emphasizing the coverage on bias or white parallels, sidesteps the disproportionate involvement of the Pakistan Muslim men in these gangs per UK reports. Such reluctance undermines the child protection efforts and erodes the trust in multicultural cohesion when accountability falters. Wouldn't that make him a Muslim nationalist or a Muslim supremacist, technically making him a hypocrite about his tweet about Donald Trump? Yes, Hassan's reluctance to directly condemn the grooming gangs despite the disproportionate Pakistan Muslim involvement, while amplifying unverified claims against Donald Trump, suggests a protective bias towards his own community. Hypocrisy thrives when accountability is group selective, not the principle based. So to wrap that up, Mr. Hassan here, with his loud voice and his big platform, calling Donald Trump a white supremacist and a white nationalist because white people might seek some sort of refuge from their totalitarian governments here in Europe, in the United States, is also a Muslim supremacist who doesn't speak about the despicable grooming gangs in the UK. Gotcha, pal. Let's take advice from you on whether Donald Trump should be accepting Europeans into the United States. You absolute piece of shit. That's where we are, and that's where we're landing with this story. Donald Trump says that white people will be prioritized in the United States because of the simple fact that we can assimilate, we don't eat each other, and the fact that us as white people aren't overrepresented in the prison system, in the crime system, in the illegal arms system, like most of the regular refugees would be. So if you're like me and you've been speaking out online for years condemning the mass uncontrolled migration into our countries, if you're in the UK, if you're in Europe, if you're in Ireland, let me know if you would avail of Donald Trump's offer of refuge. Because right now in this democratic dystopia that we live in here in Ireland, what topic can we actually question without being deemed the far right? Climate activism, mass uncontrolled migration, vaccines, the LGBTQ mafia, infiltrating our educational system and indoctrinating the minds of our children. Are we allowed to even have civil discourse on any of these topics? No. You will be shut down, you will be debanked, you will be cancelled, and you will have the police kick in your door. So yes, it is an option to seek refuge in a safe haven like the United States of America. Let me know your thoughts down below if any of that made sense. Cheers.